All right, so you can go ahead and introduce yourself for people
All
that
right.
don't know who you are.
All right, I'm Bishop Cornelius Bowser, pastor of Charity Apostolic Church, also program director of Shafat Outreach, which is a outreach program designed to help youth and young adults who are trapped in the gang life and violent lifestyle to help them to transform their mind, that they can change their life.
All right, so how about we just start from the beginning and tell us about how your childhood was.
How my childhood was?
Yeah.
Well, my childhood is a unique one because, I'm not originally from San Diego. I was born in El Centro. And at the age of 2 years old, my mom brought me here to San Diego. My aunt, my oldest aunt, Aunt D, she was already here. That's my mom's oldest sister. And so she came up here because of that. And that's how I came to San Diego. But of course, I consider myself a native San Diegan because I've been here since I was 2 years old. So, but my childhood, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s as a child, before I reached my teenage years and so on. I grew up over in what we know by the black gang, West Coast Crips. But there's various communities in that community. You have Logan Heights, you have Barrio Logan, you have Sherman, you have Grand Hills, you have Stockton, you have Memorial Park. You have all these various communities, but our gang that I was part of covered all of that community over there. So I grew up over there. The area that I grew up in, what I can remember as a child growing up was the Black Panthers. I remember, my mom, we lived on, I believe it's Clay Street. And we used to go outside because, the Black Panthers would be marching down the street. Their headquarters was, I believe it was down on 30th and Imperial, somewhere down there. 2019 Clay, yeah, and about the Black Panthers, all that, because back in the 60s and 70s,
That's good, yeah.
I remember all that.
Man, we talked.
Headquarters was on 30th, right? 30th and
yeah,
Imperial. That's what I was telling
Imperial.
you. Yeah. I was pretty smart. I was pretty smart. My mother, Ernestine Bowser, my dad, James Bowser, they raised me in a strict form of they weren't Christians, but they grew up in Christian homes. So you heard a lot of talk about God in the home, even though they were cussing and doing everything else, partying and whole shebang as young folks themselves in their 20s, and early 20s, I should say. But I grew up in a strict childhood, right? And so my thing was, as a kid, we played. I had friends that I met in the community because before I lived in the coast, we lived over in what known as neighborhoods. I was about 4 years old when my mom then moved over into the coast on Clay Street. And I remember my first friend that I met over in the coast was Emmett Williams. I lived 2 doors from him on on Clay Street. And I remember being outside playing, and this is a trip, right? Because now we wouldn't let our 4-year-old child go outside and play by themselves, right? But back then, my mom, we had a house or a duplex, whatever it was, in the back, and there's a house in the front. And I was out on the sidewalk, playing by myself. I don't know, playing in the dirt, doing something. And Emmett saw me. He was a couple years older than me, and he came down and introduced himself to me. He said, "Hey, I'm Emmett. I live right there. Blah blah blah." And he told me, he said, "Hey, there's going to be a lot of people later on that's going to be coming down here to play football and things like that. So, come on out, And so later on that day, they did. They came out and started playing football, and so that's how I met a lot of the guys. All these guys that I grew up with as a child. They were none of them really, except Emmett got caught up a little bit, but most of them did not really get caught up in the gang lifestyle, right? Most of you guys are into. Yep, so this street here, Clay Street, this is one of the streets that we played football on, and played, and Emmett lived right there in that big old house right there. We used to play hide and seek right there and hang out and so on. And this street, now it's all Mexicans, but back when I grew up, this whole street was all blacks, basically. This was a heavy, dense black community. I lived right here. But before I lived here, on South 30th Street, I lived down here. where you see the fences, the wooden fences, or right next to that, we can walk down there and I can show you where I used to I should live down there too. See this house here. One of my friends lived there. We live right here in the back. Back of these houses back here. When we first moved over to the coast, this is where we moved to. That house in the back there. And so I met Emmett. I was playing outside right out here. And he came and we met each other. And he told me they'd be playing football in the middle of the street out here. But yep, this is it. Used to be a little store down the street that we used to go to all the time. I would save money up, and 25 cents, you can go buy a whole bunch of stuff for 25 cents back in the days, back in the 60s and going into the 70s and stuff. But this was back in the 60s, because I moved here when I was about 4 years old. So that was like around 66. And we stayed here, then we moved there, and then we moved on 30th and Franklin. And yeah. Sports, going to school and just having goals and plans in life to want to do things. But still coming up as a black young man, you still kind of dealt with the violence from the perspective of fighting. And I guess that's everywhere where you're going to have to hold your own ground. So I did get in a lot of fights with a lot of people.
So as you got older, how did you perceive your neighborhood?
As I got older, really, I got rooted in that community. Even before the gang stuff broke out, I was rooted in that community. I loved that community, and I viewed that community as my community. That's, all my friends were there. Everybody I knew was there. And I was the kind of person, I wasn't interested in meeting new people somewhere else. Because to give you an example, my mom, they moved back over to the hood, right? And this was before banging, though. And we lived on 47th and 46th and Hilltop, really 47th and Hilltop, right on the corner, right across the street from Gompers. And even then, as a young kid, I still caught the bus to, at that time it was called Logan Elementary. I still caught the bus to Logan. I did not go to the schools over there. I did not want to hang out with the people over there. And it wasn't banging. There was no West Coast Crip and all that kind of stuff back then, or neighborhood Crips and all that. It was none of that, but it was just that the way I connected with my friends over there, connected with that community, that was my community. And so I used to catch the bus as a young person to back to school, Logan Elementary. Then, of course, when the banging stuff started happening, I kind of got caught up in that too a little bit. And so, but by that time, my mom and parents had moved from the neighborhood over to Golden Hills on 28th and Beach Street, which was right down the hill from the coast. So it was a good spot for me because I wasn't actually on the set, but it only took about 10-15 minutes to walk down to the set, right? So really, Golden Hills kind of became our set too, because that's where I lived and we hung out up there too. And I lived there most of my time. And then my mom moved out to East Dago, East San Diego, and I believe, and this is just my thing, I believe that's why East Dago Mob are Crips, right? Because when we moved out there was no East Dago Mob, but all my homies came out there, the coast, and we hung out with a lot of those guys, and even some of them became West Coast Crips. But I believe that's why, because of the close connection, that's why East Dago Mob became Crips, because of that connection with West Coast.
So what was your first time experiencing or seeing any type of gang activity in your neighborhood?
It was when I got into the 7th grade, right? I graduated from the 6th to the 7th grade, and I was, I think I was about 12 years old, whatever. Yeah, about 12 years old in the 7th grade. And back then, they had the busing, right, where they would bus you out to a white school. And so they bussed us out to, I think it was Maryland, they called it, and in La Jolla. And I didn't realize it then, but now I realize it, is that they were finding any excuse to kick you out. Every day, people we knew was getting kicked out of La Jolla and had to go to Memorial. I mean, kicked out of Merlin's, and not Merlin's. Was it Merlin's? I can't remember what school it was, but it was out in La Jolla. I'm thinking it was Merlin's. But I got kicked out. I don't know how long I was going there. It couldn't have been. Hold on, let me turn this off. That I was in there, but they're showing up. I got kicked out. I don't know if it was a couple of weeks or a month or whatever, and then I went to Memorial, right? And when I first went there, I didn't see any gang activity or anything like that. But I remember one day, I don't know how long I was going there, but I remember one day going to school, and I saw these guys running around acting like they were gang members, right? But these guys, when I finally got involved in the gang lifestyle, I realized that they weren't. They were just pretending, right? Pretending, but they were trying to act like. But when I saw that, my curiosity really got me, right? It got me. But what ended up happening is that when you go into school, and then when you live over there, you're hanging out, and you're going to the park, you hang out in the community, you start running across some of the guys, right, that are banging and so on. But it really wasn't. It wasn't that transition yet from into Crips, but West Coast LTD, which I believe stood for Limited, and it was kind of like a car club to my understanding. And then from there, it became West Coast Wrecking Crew. A lot of people know them, but they had the bumper jacket that said West Coast LTD on it. And they were organized, and they used to have parties at Memorial Park and things like that. But those guys, the OGs, the founders of West Coast Crip, West Coast I should say, and West Coast Crip, I used to see them. We used to see them, right? Because when you're in your community and you see them, and a lot of times when we saw them, we admired them because they seemed like they were kind of, for me, they were kind of like the heroes in the community. They were kind of like the people that everybody's looking up to and everybody feared, right? And even myself, and my friends like Laverne and all of us that would see them, we admired them like, man, these dudes are raw. Can't nobody, we thought that they were the toughest gang in San Diego, because everywhere we went, no matter where we went, and so on, we saw them. When they were thrown down, they turned it out, right? And that was, you're talking about people like Sitting Bull, 4-5, Byron BK, all these guys, Smiling Owl, Killer Shark, a lot of guys that I looked up to that was older than me, that was kind of the original founders of this, and so on. And I admired these guys, right? And looked up to them. And what ended up happening for me is that, me, Laverne, and all of us, because we lived over there, we claimed that, hey, this is our set, but we really wasn't like in it. Go ahead.
At what age did you start claiming, would you say?
I would say around 12. I kind of like when I started going, and going to the park and different things like that. We started, even though, and let me just back up and say this, like the originals, the homies, the founders, there ain't no way they would have let us, claim, right? So we were like wannabes, saying that this was our set. So make that clear. But I would say, like, when it really, 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 really like kind of turned up for me, I think I was around 13 years old. Maybe, yeah, 13 years old. I had probably in the 8th grade. I think that's when it was. And for me, on a personal level, I had a friend named Rick, Ricky Otis, and we were going to school together. And his brother was 4'5". So Rick was already banging hard, talking about I'm little 4'5" and all this, and so we started hanging out together. Yeah, I'm from the coast too. I didn't have no Crip name but at that time, because I think I got my Crip name when I was in the 9th grade, but I was running with them too, because everybody just called me Corn. But I was running, and I remember this is like when I knew that this was it. This was my life, Before I just wannabe, I just wanted to hang out and, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm from the coast, but really, wasn't from the coast from the perspective of running with the homies and stuff like that. But at age of 13 and then going to 14 is when it really kind of turned up for me. And I can't remember if I was 13 or 14 years old, but I remember I was with Rick, and I went over to his house, Little 45, and his brother 45. They were getting ready to go to South Crest Park because back during those days there would be you would have bands and different things that would come to the parks and play. They would go to Ocean View Park, different parks, and so most of the time we had the coast. We always had to go across town to have a good time. We could never we never had anything on our side of town, so so that was just normal for us. We go into enemy territory and we gonna do what we're gonna do. Back then it wasn't 5'9" Brims, it was Central City Gangsters. But I remember us being at South Crest Park, and there were some Central City Gangsters up there, and I'm here, I'm young, around 13, 14, whatever age I was, and I'm with the homies and stuff, hanging out thinking I'm somebody, with all these big homies and stuff. And I remember something's about to jump off, and all the coasters, they went into the bathroom. So I said, let me go in and see what's going on. So I went in there with them. I'm just in the back observing, checking it out, but I'm with them because I'm with 45. 45 is one of the founders. And one of another gentleman that I grew up with, MT. We call him MT Mayo. We were the same age, but he was a gangster way before me. But because I think even in elementary he was kind of like a gangster. But I remember MT. We were the same age, and I saw MT, and everybody surrounding MT, and so they took out a gun. It was a sawed-off rifle, and they gave it to him. And I saw his boldness, like, man, he ready to throw down here, So when I saw that, it kind of inspired me from the perspective of violence and gangs and things like that. Man, this is what I want to do, because they were together, they were organized, and they looked out for each other. They had your back. They made you feel welcome. They made you feel a part. You know what I mean? And it was a camaraderie and a unity that was there, that was stronger than any bond that a parent or anyone else could have. And I'm exaggerating when I say that, but that's really the way it was. I got to a place to where that I was saying, when I'm talking about West Coast Crip, I love my set just like I love my mama, right? That's how deep I was in it. That's how I felt about my set, and that's the way we felt about each other, right? We were sold out for each other. And when I saw that unity, that togetherness, when I saw how bold and courageous they were, and how nobody got shot or anything, but they were thinking that someone was geared to jump off, and they was ready to throw down, right? Because we, of course, outnumbered over there and so on. But nothing really went down that day. But that was the day that I knew that like, this is the life I want to live. This is it. I felt connected. I felt accepted. Nobody judged me or anything. And from that day forward, it was on. I was like, hey, West Coast, and we became roller coasters, right? The Young Bucks. I don't know when that song came out. The song came out a little later, but I think it was like in '76 or somewhere around there. And let me see, it's 72, 73, 74, 75. So I was about 14 years old, and I remember that song came out, Roller Coasters, and we became that first West Coast Crip Young Buck crew, right? And we called ourselves the Roller Coasters. The youngsters did, because we couldn't run with the OG. We ran with them, but they had their thing. So we had our little clique, our little group, and we called ourselves Roller Coaster off the song Ohio Players, Roller Coaster, and then we said Roller Coaster.
So when would you say that you became official or accepted by your gang?
Then I would say that was the moment for me. That was the moment when I hooked up with 4-5, and by the way, Laverne and Pooch and all them, they came up there. They were up there also that same day and so on with us all. And I think that we, like I said before, we were always claiming, and we always saw that as our set. But I felt that day it launched us into the mainstream, right? Of these guys who started this stuff, and these guys who were throwing down and holding down the set and shaking up the whole city, right? At least in the black community, black gangs. And it was that day that I felt like this was it, and I was accepted. And so no jumping and all that. You have to be introduced to it. You have to be homegrown or what have you, and things like that. All this stuff they do today, I think they got it from somewhere else, but we didn't start out like that. You have to be introduced to it by someone, kind of like the mafia. They bring somebody in. It had to be that way, or a family member, or homegrown. Grew up over there in the community. Everybody know you, and if you start claiming, you just got to show that you serious. and you have to put in work, right, to demonstrate that. And you're going to get the opportunity, especially being from the coast, because they were in the stuff every day.
So what was it like in the 70s and 80s?
For me, it was, being from the coast, I felt like I was the runt of the litter, right? I felt like, because the people that I ran with, Laverne and all of them, 4-5, all these guys, I kind of always looked to them like, man, these dudes ain't scared of nothing. With me, I was scared, Hey, we go somewhere and they tell me, yeah, let's go to the party. I'm saying, ain't that, Bloods over there or whoever, y'all just want to go to the party? Yeah, you ain't afraid of getting shot or anything. And so for me, it seemed like they wasn't scared of nothing, But for me, I had fears, man, and I didn't want to die, you know what I mean? But I went anyway, and I participated anyway, and I got caught up in a lot of stuff that way. Did I answer your question? What was your...
No, I just mean like overall, like, what was the gang like
back then?
Like as far as like, other sets and just everybody in the whole, like the whole gang atmosphere in the 70s and 80s.
Well, it's in the 70s, 80s, kind of still like what it is today from the perspective of the gangs in Southeast San Diego. The only thing was that Emerald Hills was not a gang. Little Africa was not a gang, right? But you did, and then Lincoln Park later in the 70s became Lincoln Park. Before then, there were some other different things. You talked to them about their history, but it was basically West Coast Crips. Central City became 5'9" Brims. Even some people Central City still say, if you find some older guy, they'll still tell you they're Central City. But Central City gangsters, and by the way, Central City gangsters, they wore blue rags. But I don't know what switched them over and stuff. But then they became 5'9" Brims. And so you had West Coast, you had 5'9". You had the neighborhood Crips. Then when Lincoln Park came in, Lincoln Park Pyrus became Bloods. Then you had Skyline. You had Old Furrow Park. So it was about during that time 6 in Southeast. Then of course outside of Southeast Center you had Linda Vista Crips. But back in my time, and most of the time, things jumped off 2 or 3 different ways, right? If some Bloods came through our set on the bus and they were disrespecting. And one of the things that they didn't know is that one of the homies who got out of the gang, one of the OGs, he got out of the gang and he became a bus driver, right? And I remember one time there was this, I don't know if he's from Skyline or where he's from, but he came through throwing up his set on the bus. And it was the homie that's driving the bus. We said, stop the bus. And he stopped the bus, and we got him bus and beat the dude down, man, because, he came through disrespecting the set. So you had things like that happened, we would go to parties. Like I said, we always had to go across town to the parties. So the coast, we got to a place to where we traveled in packs, right? Because we knew when we go across town, we're gonna be on enemy territory. But the fortunate thing for us is that, at least it appeared to me to be this way, is that most of the time we had those guys outnumbered on their own set, right? If we went to a party anywhere across town, it became our party. When we were just fighting, it became our party. And of course, fights would break out. We would get in fights and things like that. But most of the time, we took it over. And those guys from the other side of town, if they be honest, they'll tell you we took it over. Especially when it's about fighting and when we was fighting each other. So that was another way we threw down. Then another way that kind of got us in, like I told you, at the parks. And back then, most of the time, things jumped off at Ocean View Park. But everyone from San Diego, at least Southeast San Diego, went to Ocean View Park on Sundays. You have bands of different things, people getting high, selling drugs, low riders coming through. You had the whole thing happening. And we would go down there, and by the end of the day, we get in a big gang fight, with different gangs and so on. So that was stuff that we prepared for, though. We knew that, okay, we get to go here, we get to throw down, we about to turn it out. And then sometimes maybe at a concert, or you happen to be somewhere and run across some guys and things jump off. But it was about fighting. It was about fighting in, I'd say, the mid-70s and going to the late 70s. Everything was about knuckles, being good with your hands to fight. And every now and then somebody might get stabbed or shot or something like that, but it wasn't like it is now. With a lot of these gang members, all they want to do is shoot. Or even if they fight you, they come back and shoot you. Back then, if we got in a fight, I'll see you next time. We're gonna throw down again, right? And that's just the way it was, And we didn't have no guns or anything at that time, and I'll tell you about that. But wherever we went, yeah, we got into fights. We would turn it out. There was a couple times we were outnumbered and so on, but for the most part, we traveled in numbers. We say, hey, there's a party over thus and thus, and we all get on the bus. Back before we got our cars and stuff, we all get on the bus and catch the bus across town. We'll go to wherever set they were and go on their set where they hanging out and turn them out right then and there. And we got them just by sheer numbers, though. You know what I mean? We had them outnumbered, and for the most part, and because, like I was telling you, the Coast at the beginning is togetherness, it's brotherhood. We had our issues, we fought and had issues and stuff, but we were together, especially when it came to the enemy.
So what was you guys' relationship with Mexicans back then?
Excuse me, that's a good question, because and this is what the black gangs don't understand when they're dealing with the Coast, and what happened when we switched from these to shooting is because over in the Coast, especially us down in the 20s, the rolling 20s, and I can tell you a story about that, but over in the Coast, we lived down in the 20s, and down in the 20s, and where we hung out at in the 20s was where all the Mexicans were. And I don't know what happened, but something eventually what in our corner, 25th Street, there used to be a liquor store right here called Pat's Liquor Store, and this is where we would hang out at, all day long, getting high and so on. Sometimes we'd go across the street and what have you, but this was our spot, 25th Street. And when it got around 9, 10 o'clock, we would walk down Imperial and go up to 30th Street where all the other homies were hanging out, and we would get up there, and my homeboy, the one I remember start coining the phrase, is Alvin Hayes, who probably going to be getting out in a little bit. He did about about 30 years for murder, and he's geared to get out. But we stroll up to 30th Imperial, and he would see us coming up, and he'd say, "Here come the 25th Street fellas." But he didn't mean it from a perspective we different from them. But this is where we hung out, right here on 25th Street, and they most of the time hung out on 33rd Street. So it was 25th Street fellas. And there's 33rd, the Trayella. One of the things I used to say is Trayella, do like I tell her, come be the best with the 25th Street fellas. And then we went and got some shirts where we put Deuce 5 on the back. That's when we start calling ourselves Deuce 5, and they start calling themselves Trey. And then from there, it was 4-5. I remember when we was talking about it, and it said, anything from the 20s on down is rolling 20s. And 30s on up, rolling 30s, and that's when we became rolling 20s and rolling 30s, and so on. But and so down here, the 20s, as you see, like you see it now, that's the way it was back in our days. There was a lot of Latinos that live here, Mexicans that lived here, and they're friendly now. But back in our days, we faced a lot of hostility, and that's why we have to equalize it with guns and things like that. So with the way we were treated, even when we hung out here, we have to watch our back. Not just from the black gangs, but from the Mexican gangs also. So we was always under fire and under pressure. A black person couldn't walk by Chicano Park. We had to be careful. And we had to wait till everything was over with and done before we did that, right? Because you had, they had, whatever they had going on there, it was dangerous for us. And so even today, I still have a certain feeling when they talk about going to Chicano Park for things, because I know how it was back in my days. But what ended up happening is that we got tired of it, right? We got tired of them. They had us outnumbered. They were using sticks and knives and the big old belt buckles and things like that to fight us. And so we got guns and started shooting them. And so they, either when they ran up on us, we packing and we put the heat on them, or they mess with us, we come right back and sneak up on them and take care of business. And so after we started doing that, I mean, some of them that was like hanging out, living close to where our hangouts were, they moved. They had to get out. Others, when they saw us walking down the street, they didn't bother us no more. Or unless they had a gun too, and they had to be ready to throw down. But that was the equalizer. And we didn't get guns to kill people or to hurt people, but we got guns to protect ourselves. And so when you talk, and at that time, over with the gangs over in the black gangs, we were still just fighting. We weren't doing any shooting. We were just fighting. And that's the thing, like a lot of other gangs don't realize, is that at least my homies that I ran with, and in the 30s too, because some things jumped off up there too, is that we had upper hand because we were already at war with the Mexicans, and we already had guns and had to start using guns on these guys, right? But we would keep our guns at home, and every now and then pack them on us when we were hanging out in front of our house or going to the store. No, there's going to be some Mexicans somewhere. So we didn't always have the guns with us, but we had the guns in case we needed them, right? If something jumped off or we knew we was going somewhere and we were going to run into something, we'd pack them with us. But most of the time we had the guns at home. So when we went to parties across town, we didn't take our guns. You know, we just went and we throw down and fight, whether we went to the park or anything like that. And where I saw the turning point, the real turning point, because there's always shootings and things like that, but where I saw the real turning point when it became hard for us to go across town and just party and fight was when Skyline robbed a gun store, and they had a lot of guns, and they were jacking us everywhere we went. We go to a party, they popping up with all their guns, we had to get up on out of there, right? So then when we went across town, we started taking our guns too, right? And then it got to a place where you couldn't even like take your gun across town and still party and say if somebody run up, they're gonna get blasted. You know, now it's like it got so heavy. Like I remember one time we drove by this party in Skyline. We was gonna go party, and they had all these gang members out there, and we knew they were packing, so we knew we couldn't go in there, right? So you know, we had to do the other thing. But what I'm telling you is that that's when we started doing these drive-bys and stuff, because when you're at war, you want to fight, and folks don't want to fight no more. They want to shoot. Then, you know, my homies started shooting back. And so it wasn't the coast. The coast didn't start the shooting. The coast, we held ours through fighting. We held ours. We, you know, not all, but most of the homies could throw down, right? And we can hold our own. And so, and even we got our butt whooped, we didn't go run home and get a gun. You know, it was like, well, I'll see you next time. We're going to do this again, right? But when it became difficult to